Welcome to the Sonic Boomers podcast. Back in May of 2021, you may recall we were all in the middle of the pandemic, and everybody was, well, kind of down, kind of depressed, and with good reason. And so Maureen and I decided that we would do this particular episode to bring back some very pleasant memories, especially for those of us of a certain generation, although we do think that this show is cross-generational. Now, we did record it before we were on YouTube. We are taking this legacy episode, putting it up here on YouTube, and adding pictures to it, so it'll be a more interesting watch. And I do hope that you don't hit stop. Continue all the way through, because I think you're really going to enjoy this one as we talk about the lost amusement parks of New Jersey.
And there were a lot of them, surprisingly so.
More than I realized, but a
too.
lot of them disappeared very early on, only lasted maybe a year or two. So see if you remember any of those, and maybe you went to some of these amusement parks. If you went to this one that we're about to tell you about, you probably came out with a few bumps and bruises.
Maybe.
Maybe a few scratches. And I know you got to be saying, he's talking about Action Park.
Right, in Vernon, New Jersey.
The most dangerous amusement park in the United States at one time.
Crazy.
It ran 1978 until 1996.
So it lasted a decent amount of time.
A lot of rides, 75 rides. 40 of which were water slides.
Yeah, I remember mostly it being a water type of amusement park.
A lot of people got hurt.
Yeah, unfortunately, like you said, it was deemed one of the most dangerous parks. And I think a lot of that was due to the fact that a lot of the rides were ones that you had to have a certain amount of physical prowess to be able to navigate.
Yeah.
Things like the Tarzan swing, where you were swinging on a rope, letting go and letting yourself into a pool of water.
Ice cold water,
ice cold
because it was a spring.
So, I mean, there were things like that kind of were asking for trouble, if you ask me.
Yeah. Do you want to touch on some of the things that happened there over the years?
Sure. There were 6 people that were known to have died directly or indirectly from rides at Action Park. July 8th, 1980, a 19-year-old named George Larson Jr., he was riding the Alpine slide when his car jumped the track and his head struck a rock, killing him. Oof. Gene Mulvihill, I guess who was the owner at the time, told reporters that Larson was an employee. Now, get this is a little shady, because a customer's death would have to be reported to the state. But by saying it was an employee, they kind of got under the radar. And he worked as a ski lift operator when it was a ski attraction in the wintertime. Never worked at Action Park, but they coined him as an employee and got away with it.
Yeah.
July 24th in 1982, a 15-year-old boy drowned in the tidal wave pool. August 1st, 1982, a 27-year-old man from Long Island, he was riding a kayak and it tipped over, and he got out to right the kayak, and in doing so, he stepped on a grate that was either in contact with or close to the water with live wiring. Now, wiring and electricity, not a good mix.
Never works out well.
So there were some underwater fans that somehow became exposed, and he suffered a severe electric shock, which brought him into cardiac arrest. And some of his family members were also nearby at the time, and they got injured. He was taken to a hospital in Warwick, New York, where he died of the shock-induced cardiac arrest. The park at first disputed that the electric current caused his death, saying there were no burns on his body, but the coroner responded that burns don't usually occur when it's a water electricity.
That's correct.
So, again, the park was kind of trying to divest itself of responsibility, it seems. The ride was drained, and they closed it for the investigation. Accounts differed as to the extent of the exposed wiring. The park said it was just a nick, while others argued that it was close to 8 inches. The state's Labor Department found that the fan was properly maintained and installed and cleared the park of wrongdoing. However, it also said that the current had the possibility to cause bodily harm under certain circumstances. So the park claimed that it had been vindicated although it never reopened the ride, saying that people would be afraid to go on it afterwards, and rightly so.
Yeah. So 1996 was the end of Action Park, and I guess the end of the mayhem.
Right.
There's actually a documentary about Action Park that you can probably find online, talking all about the history of accidents and incidents there.
Right. There were several in the tidal wave pool.
Yeah, I think 3, right?
3 of them in the tidal wave pool.
Yeah.
And another one, a fatal heart attack suffered by a visitor who was in the Tarzan swing, jumped off, and
Into the cold water.
It was 50 to 60 degrees.
Yeah,
Now,
that's too cold.
You know, at the beginning of the season, when you go down the shore, the ocean is maybe 60 degrees, and you can't stand to go in there. So I can't imagine plunging yourself into this pool of water. The other swimming pools were more like 70 and 80 degrees, but this was 50 to 60 degrees. It was a spring-fed.
For a spring water is
spring
very,
water,
very
so
cold.
That's cold, and that's what it was.
Hypothermia, and that was it
So-
for that guy. Then there was Bertrand Island, which I don't remember, but it was in Lake Hopatcong. It was called the Coney Island of New Jersey, and it ran from 1919 until 1983. And it was built on a peninsula which actually extended out into Lake Hopatcong.
Right. So it really wasn't an island, but it was like a little peninsula that was stretched out. With
Bertrand
rides.
Island sounds better than
Yeah,
Bertrand Peninsula.
Yeah.
And now it's a condominium development.
Yeah. But the sign is still there for Bertrand Island, but nothing to do
Yeah,
with the
it's
amusement
like an
park.
overhead arch, I think, when you go
Yeah,
in. It
it
says
looks very
Bertrand
nice.
Island. Then there was Olympic Park in Irvington, 1887 until 1965. And we used to live right across the street from what used to be Olympic Park. We lived for 36 years in Irvington, and our home was on 40th Street. We were one house in from the corner of 40th and Olympic Terrace. And that was one of the gates to go into Olympic Park, was right off of Olympic Terrace. And the roller coaster was like right across from where our driveway would have been if you kept going.
Yeah. So we know that one firsthand. I know I went there, probably every year while I was young, and rode a lot of the rides. It's a very fond memory to a lot of people in that area.
And had an incredible swimming pool.
That's what I never was in the swimming pool, because we used to go at night, and the pool, of course, would be only open during the day. But it had like a sandy beach around it, as I understand.
Yeah, one side had a sand beach, and in the middle of it they had, I guess, like an island that you could swim out to.
Like a dock kind of thing.
Yeah.
And what was unusual about the pool was that it was lower around the perimeter, and it got deeper towards the center, as opposed to most pools, which have a low end and a high end. This was more like a deepening as you went in towards the middle. But I think it was a saltwater pool, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, saltwater, kind of like the one that they had up at Palisades. Mm-hmm. And I think it might have had a wave maker too. I'm not sure.
That I don't know. But, it was an old German concept, like a beer garden with the pa bands, and they had really good...
Had a roller skating rink.
Roller skating rink. They used to have a circus. If you went there at night, you got a full circus, and they had the great birch beer in the beer garden with out of a keg. It was really nice place.
In fact, the church that you and I went to for many years, St. Paul the Apostle in Irvington, when it was under construction,
right?
The masses were held in the roller skating rink.
Skating rink, yes.
Because the Gunther family, they were parishioners.
Mm-hmm. And they allowed the church to use it until the building of the church was constructed.
And the story goes, I don't know if it's just apocryphal or not, but the story goes that if you lived on 40th Street, they would give you free admission to the park because you were putting up with the noise.
I've heard that.
And I've
from a
heard
lot
that
of people.
story.
Yeah, and or any of the surrounding streets. If you were within earshot of the place, you got free passes for your family.
The last season for Olympic Park was in 1965 when the Gunther family sold it for its real estate potential. They sold it for $2 million.
And it languished for like 16 years.
Yeah.
before they decided what they were going to do with it, because, as you understand, the park encompassed both Maplewood and Irvington, and the two towns had very differing viewpoints on what should be done with how the property should be disposed of, what the zoning should be, how the taxes should be divided, blah blah blah. And it was in court for over like 16 years. It went back and forth, and you'd hear, "Oh, it's going to do this. Oh, no, it's not." And
meanwhile, a lot of the wreckage, a lot of the stuff was just standing there aging.
Right, and overgrown with weeds. And eventually they demolished it, and it became a light industrial complex,
Right.
which is how it is today.
I remember taking our kids, because our kids were fascinated by the whole history of it, and we walked across the street, and we went over to where the swimming pool used to be. And the story goes that when they drained the swimming pool, they demolished everything, they had all of this wreckage to get rid of. And so they just bulldozed it into the swimming pool and covered everything over.
That may be. I can't verify that,
Yeah.
but the
And it was kind of sad because it's a parking lot now behind. There was a vitamin company there, and their parking was where the swimming pool used to be. And it was kind of sad.
And you said you could kind of see like a little depression.
There was a little depression in the ground where it kind of went down a little bit. So it kind of gave you the idea that, okay, this is where the pool was.
Yeah, yeah. But, it was a fond place to go.
Yeah. A lot of happy memories about Olympic Park. And then there was maybe the grandest park of them all, at least in the New York metropolitan area. And if you are a baby boomer and you listened to AM radio in the 1960s, you heard this.
Palisades has the rides, Palisades has the fun. Come on over. Shows and dancing are free, so's the parking, so gee. Come on over. Palisades from coast to coast, where a dime buys the most. Palisades Amusement Park swings all day and after dark. Ride the coaster, get cool in the waves in the pool, you'll have fun. So come on over.
You can't tell me that you did not sing along with that.
That's for
What
sure.
a terrific jingle. It's iconic. Mm-hmm. It is really iconic. I forget the name of the guy who sang it.
I'm sure somebody will know it.
Somebody will know. Somebody will know. You can write to us at Pete Maureen Podcast and tell us who sang that. The guy's name, I guarantee you, as soon as we get done recording this show, it'll come to me.
Probably.
I think it was Steve something. I can't remember the last
I wouldn't
name.
know.
But they did have the world's largest outdoor saltwater pool with a wave maker, I believe. It was a huge park. Mm-hmm. But the thing that really caused their demise in 1971, it ran from 1898 till 1971,
That's a good long run.
was there was a lot of pressure from local residents who were sick and tired of the traffic jams getting into the park because they didn't have adequate parking. And so there would be a lot of traffic backed up on local streets and people parking on the local streets and so forth. And it didn't go well with the local residents. And there was a lot of pressure, too, from real estate developers because you had this incredible tract of property up on the Palisades.
Mm-hmm. It's a gorgeous view of the city.
Gorgeous view of the city. And, of course, they saw dollar signs.
Yeah.
You know, we can turn this into one hell of a condo. I think they put up like 4 or 5 different condominium towers. It was a Texas company that eventually bought the thing. And it went to the wrecking ball in 1971. They used to have a stage there. They called it the free stage, I think it was. And anybody who was anybody in the rock and roll world would appear there. They'd Frankie Avalon and, Chubby Checker, and the shows would be hosted by Dick Clark and Cousin Brucey. Mm-hmm. And we had a local TV show here, Clay Cole. Some of you may remember Clay Cole's Record Wagon, which was kind of like a local version of the Dick Clark American Bandstand. And it was originally done out of the old Channel 13 in Newark. And then it moved over to Channel 11 in New York. And Clay Cole would do his TV show from there. And you could see these shows for free. You could see Chubby Checker, Frankie Avalon, and it was just
Imagine
part
that.
of the cheap admission.
It didn't, where a dime buys the most.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mention that.
That's
a dime.
incredible. And then there's Kids World.
Ah, yes, Sammy the Sea Lion.
Our kids loved Kids World. It was in Long Branch, and it ran, only 2 years, 1985 to 1987. Part of it was embraced by the Long Branch Pier, which had other attractions on it.
Right.
And then the Kids World was a water park on the other side of the street. I think that's Ocean Avenue there.
Right.
And it was on the other side, and that was like a water park for little kids.
For little kids. It was nothing bad. You know, it was like a wading pool, little fountains, little tiny slides and stuff. It was not the big scary water parks like we have now. And it was great when you had young kids because there wasn't a lot of places that you could take them where they could play safely like that.
It was great for our kids.
Yeah.
And if you ever walked along that pier in Long Branch, you probably heard this music. It is the music of the Haunted Mansion of Long Branch. That is the music that they would play on the loudspeakers as you walk by what was undoubtedly one of the most frightening amusement parks ever conceived.
The Haunted Mansion at Long Branch is a living, breathing nightmare of more than 30 incredible rooms, each with its own very special surprise. Wander through its myriad of secret passageways and winding labyrinths. Discover the graveyard of the living dead and its unimagined terror. There's Renfield and his spiders, the Prince of Darkness, Count Dracula, and many more. At the Haunted Mansion at Long Branch, it's waiting for you.
Man, even the commercial was scary.
Yeah. Gives me chills.
Good voiceover guy.
Sounds like Vincent Price a little.
I took our kids there on
I think just Sean.
maybe it was just Sean.
Yeah.
And we went to the Haunted Mansion, and this was after Kids World had taken it over. And they had toned it down because the original Haunted Mansion, there was one at Long Branch, one down in Brigantine. I'm telling you, not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
Really. Live actors made up in costumes and just scary, scary stuff. And so we took our kids down, and I went into the Haunted Mansion with my elder son, Sean. And at that time, they did not have the live actors in there. And it was creepy. The Haunted Mansion was 3 stories high, 10,000 square feet.
It was a mansion.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. It was a mock-up of a mansion, and it had these long, dark corridors, and you would go from one exhibit to another, and they would have like a headless woman with like blood being pumped into her neck. And I remember walking by, they had one exhibit. It was kind of like an old dining room, with the old furniture and cobwebs and real dark, spooky lighting. And they had these mannequins of like decomposing bodies sitting at the dinner table with plates and stuff. And you would walk by and the organ would come on.
Yeah.
And the keys would go up and down all by themselves. And so Sean and I got through the whole thing, and it was fine. It was spooky, but it was fun spooky. The second time that I took him through a few years later, I didn't realize that they had brought back the live actors. So now old Pete goes in and says, "I've got this. Come on, Sean, let's go in. I've got this." And we're walking through the Haunted Mansion, and we come up to this Grim Reaper standing there with the sickle and very stoically. I thought it was a wax figure. And I touched it, and I said to Sean, "Wow, look at this Grim Reaper. Doesn't this look real?" And the guy in the costume goes, I run. I let go of my son's hand, and I'm running like my butt is on fire. And I go running out of the Haunted Mansion. And little Sean is there, and he's going, "Dad, it's just a guy in a costume. What, what are you running for?"
I wonder if he even remembers.
I'll bet you he does. I'll bet you he does. And of course, there was Kids World, and Kids World had a nice catchy jingle too. Not as good as Palisades, but pretty good. Listen.
There's a Kids World that surrounds you. It's happening all around you. The fun that makes the magic moment. Every face tells a story. Dizzy, dizzy spins, jumping out, bumping in. Riding down, climbing high, it all begins. At the neatest kids' place in the whole wide world. Share the magic moment at Kids World.
National Guard G.I. Joe Days display August 1st and 2nd at Kids World, Long Branch, New Jersey.
Share the magic moment at Kids World.
There was a wonderful innocence to Kids World.
Yeah, yeah.
And, of course, it all burned to the ground.
Unfortunately, there was a McDonald's on that pier, and I guess it must have been a grease fire or something that started. And as you know, those piers were all made out of wood.
They were all wood, so it was all kindling.
So it was, once it started, it was darn hard to put it out.
The entire pier was lost. The Haunted Mansion was lost. I remember when it was on television, little Sean was like crying.
Yeah.
And he was worried about Sammy the sea lion. Yeah.
Sammy was like a sea lion that they had like a fountain spraying out of his nose. And it was cute,
So 1985 to 87, and that was the short, sad life of Kids World.
Yeah.
Then there was one that I remember. I went there once, Cowboy City in Farmingdale, which is near Howell. It was on Route 33 in Farmingdale, and that only ran from 1955 to 1960.
Another short-lived.
Short-lived, and it was a replica of a Wild West town. They had the typical Wild West community with the saloon and the stagecoach, and they would rob the stagecoach and
things. Yeah.
And I remember going there as a kid, and then there was another one with a similar format called Wild West City,
right,
which was up in Byram, and that ran from 1957 to 2009. Then there's Warner Brothers Jungle Habitat, which had a very short life of only 4 years, 1972 to 1976.
Right, and that was quite a new concept at the time, to have actual live animals that were not in a zoo type setting, animals that you could ride through and a safari trail and see them.
I guess kind of like
close.
What they have down at Six Flags, although I heard they don't have that anymore at Six Flags now.
Well, I don't know.
I read that the safari is gone at Six Flags.
I don't know.
Or they changed it that you're not driving through it or something like that.
I haven't heard. I don't know.
Because they had incidents at Jungle Habitat where people were attacked by some of the animals, and the animals had damaged some people's cars. That even happened down at Six Flags a few times.
Well, they used to warn you that I don't know if they don't really do that so much anymore, but remember convertible cars and cars that have like those vinyl roofs?
They would tear the vinyl.
They would have like a bypass route because there were certain animals that had the claws that could damage your car. So like if you were driving through, they had like a bypass that you would not see those particular animals, and you'd only see the ones that were safe for you to drive through.
But they did have a few unfortunate incidents.
October 9th, 1972, an Israeli tourist, Abraham Levy, was driving through the safari in a taxi and was attacked by a lion. And then also in November, only a month later, 1972, 2 wolves escaped, but they were caught before exiting the property, so it was kind of like a non-event. Nothing really bad happened. And then 1972 was not a good year. Then December 1972, so this is 3 months in a row something happening. Television show host Jack Parr was cut because he was roughhousing with a 6-month-old tiger cub. He was filming a TV special down there, and he was playing around with the tiger cub, and he got cut. In 1974, a woman was bitten by a baby elephant who reached out of its enclosure with its trunk and grabbed the woman. How scary is that?
Yeah.
And she got $200,000 for her injuries.
Wow.
And in 1977, 7 of the park's animals contracted tuberculosis and ended up being euthanized.
When Jungle Habitat closed in 1976, the rumor was that a lot of the animals were left out there to die or that they were shot. There is no truth in that story, apparently. The animals were sold off to other zoos.
That makes the most sense.
That makes more sense.
Fairy Tale Forest in Oak Ridge, New Jersey, 1957 to 2007. It was a fairy tale place with a castle and fairy tale figures, and again closed. It's now a storage facility. although you can still see remnants of the castle there.
Yeah, that's sad.
And then there was Gingerbread Castle in Hamburg, New Jersey, 1930s to the 1970s. The castle is actually still standing there. It's not an open attraction anymore. A family has bought it, and they're thinking about trying to refurbish it and reopen it. I went once when I was a kid, and what I remember is the inside was, made up like Hansel and Gretel's, the story scenes from Hansel and Gretel. But while you were waiting online to go into the castle, they only allowed small groups at a time. The witch would come out, and she would, interact with the kids online, and she'd be like, "Oh, my pretty, I can't wait to put you into my oven and make gingerbread out of you."
Yeah, Don Oriello is the guy who bought it. And his grandfather was in the entertainment field. He was involved in the creation of the Casper cartoons and
Felix
the Cat,
right?
too. Yeah. So he owns it now, and he is slowly trying to get it up and running. And we certainly wish him a lot of luck with that. And finally, and this one upset a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Beaucraft Playland on Route 22 in Scotch Plains, which existed from 1946 until just a few years ago in 2018.
Yep.
And there were only 2 owners in that entire time. And for most of the time, it was Ted Miller and his wife. Ted created it in 1946, right after the war. And he
started it as an archery.
He was an archery and skiing enthusiast.
Right.
And
so
he
it didn't start out as an amusement park.
No, he had an archery range there and a ski shop, and then he put in like a ski lift or something. And from there, it grew into the Beaucraft Playland that we know today. And they had a number of rides. It was a big complex. It was 12 and a half acres.
Once it was leveled and you could see the amount of land that it encompassed, it was quite a big tract.
Big parking lot.
Yeah.
They had 21 attractions in the final season, including 2 roller coasters. And Ted Miller and his wife sold it to the Mark family in 1996. They had an incident there in 1992 where a little kid fell off the Ferris wheel, fell 50 feet, miraculously survived. And they sold the complex for $2.8 million. The Mark family wanted to turn Beaucraft into a water park, but there was a lot of opposition from the local people. There was also a lot of pressure to demolish it and build condos.
Yeah, the value of the real estate was worth more than the attraction itself. So
the Mark family, to their credit, tried to keep it open. They were in court for 6 years, and now it's all demolished.
So did you enjoy this edition of the Sonic Boomers talking about New Jersey's lost amusement parks? Did you go to any of them? I went to a few of them. My wife did too. Did you get the bejesus scared out of you at the Haunted Mansion at Long Branch? Do you still have that injury or that sore elbow or sore arm from when you had an accident at Action Park? Well, hey, we hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, give us a subscription and a like. And sometimes the likes are even more important than subscribing because it helps us to find new viewers. So please like, and we'd appreciate if you subscribe too. Maureen and I will be back on camera for the next edition of the Sonic Boomers podcast. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.